I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today we are joined by the wonderful Stuart Krasnow, who is the showrunner of The Weakest Link. And you were involved in producer on the original iteration when this was first airing with Anne Robinson, which I love. And I was interested in when you were essentially redeveloping a property that you'd been so heavily involved in creatively. How did you find the aspects of what needed to be part of that structure, part of the design, part of the look and feel of the show? Obviously the question rounds, there's certain things that you really have to carry over against aspects where you felt like you could really bring new elements to it and really evolve aspects of the format.
I think first of all, thank you so much, Mara. This is such a great opportunity to talk about the show, and I just enjoy what you do, and I'm just so happy to be here. The casting was really the most important piece. I think Jane Lynch was literally the linchpin, if you will. Sorry about that. But I think, without having the right, who's gonna be like Anne Robinson? Who's gonna be that character? And I think, of course, everyone thought Jane Lynch from Glee, that Sue Sylvester character made sense here, but it also had to have a little bit more finesse and a little bit more in on the joke, I think, less caricature and more just, Jane playing game show host, but it's kind of an anti-game show host role. So I think the question writing definitely changed. I think we decided collectively that we wanted to be a little bit more clever, a little bit more wide. I think on broadcast TV, we want to be so inclusive. It's really important to you need to know your Megan Thee Stallions, and then you also need to know how do you measure a stallion? What's the measurement on it? You have to have kind of everything in between. So general knowledge mixed with pop culture. And my greatest hope is that when people watch the show together, that the 10-year-old knows something that no one else in the family knows, but at the same time there's someone else who knows something that another person doesn't know. So I think that there was a lot more attention spent to that than I think people realize on a game show.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. And with what you were saying about Jane as well, what's really wonderful about her as a host of the show is it really honors what Anne Robinson built with the show. There's that kind of very acerbic sense of humor and the banter that she has and the way that she speaks with contestants, but there's also kind of comedic heart to it as well. At the end of the show when she's like, you're the winner, you're the strongest link, it feels very genuine, but there's little nods to Anne Robinson's style, but still making it very much Jane Lynch and bringing her personality to the foreground. And so how did you work with her to kind of combine those two spaces?
Well, it's interesting because that's a really astute comment because when you look at the original show, Anne was really a bully. And I think the tone of our country over a 20-year span and the tone of the world has changed. That much of a bully, I don't think would be tolerated or popular today. You can't be, Anne was relentlessly mean without apology. So that idea that Jane, I think instinctively already knew, she said, I'm going to do this, but I want to be in on the joke. I'm not going to be as mean. I need to also be there. And I think we all agreed with her that she had to play it with a little bit of okay, we're having fun here. But I think people now know to come on the show who've watched it, the new contestants come on, they know they're okay, come at me. They're expecting something. And I think as long as the other people, it's never personal. It's always about something they said wrong or they didn't know quite right or something they slip up and say about themselves, that kind of thing.
And in terms of the competition format, like you were saying, it's really something which leads itself to a broad spectrum of knowledge and trivia. And there's the introduction now of pictures on screen, which was a new aspect. So how did you find those details of here's how we really expand upon it? Because like you said, it's also connecting to the audience. The audience are playing along at home, and you really know that they're sitting there responding in their living rooms. So you want it to really connect to them as much as it connects to the contestants.
I really believe that game shows are successful again today because of the smartphone. We're so used to interacting with things. And of course, as far as TV goes, game shows are the ultimate play along and having people play along in different ways. And I think you're right, just hearing questions wasn't enough anymore. So I think seeing those pictures, we don't want to say here's a picture of somebody, what's their name? It's more here's the cast of a show and who's missing from the picture. So we try to do more clever versions of it, or video that's sort of funny about something, or a funny piece of nature video and say, this common thing you might see, but what's it really doing here? And then they have to make it, it's molting, or this ugly, creature losing its skin. What does it mean? Let people have a layer story to what the question is. It's not just a plain, straightforward question, if that makes sense.
It does. And I also wanted to ask about the scripting of a show like this because, again, kind of going back to what we were talking about with Jane, it leans into her wit, her humor, and there's moments that are organic and off the cuff because she's responding to what's happening live in the moment, but you also are scripting out elements of her delivery. And so what does that look like in terms of where you need to be very specific in a lot of the scripting, where there's kind of, here's a script for this segment, but you can also kind of go off of it a little bit, and here's the space where we're going to improv and flow back and forth?
The scripts go through many iterations, and a lot of game shows sort of do a pattern. Actually, the original game show, Anne just read the exact script as is every time, same thing every time. 4 people left, who's going home? One of you will not, and someone's sent home. Jane, there's references to Shakespeare, there's references to the 80s, there's references to rap songs. So she's playing off all of those pop culture references in the scripting of the show itself, and every script is different. It's never, it's not that pattern game show where it's like every single time you're gonna say the same thing. So there is a lot of attention played to that, and Jane has a big part in that, and I think that's the part of the show she really loves taking ownership of as well, because we have great writers, and I think she really just looks at that as a really, I think when you're an actress and you're in so many things, you don't get to give a lot of, I don't think she gets to do that kind of feedback on a scripted show, so in the same amount of way that she would on this show. So she really owns that piece, and it has to be in her voice.
And when it comes to the segments where it's between the rounds and she's having discourse with the contestants about how they did, questions that they didn't get right, how much consciousness is there for everybody of making sure that you're not influencing the outcome of the game? Because when she's talking to them, they've all voted for who they think is the weakest link already, so it's not going to influence that round. But you have to be cognizant of, we want to make sure we're kind of hitting everybody equally so that we're not influencing who people are going to vote for the next round.
This is such a good point. There are certain points where we are allowed within the rules of our show to point out who was weakest and who was strongest, but we don't always do that. And I think strategically, where it's always about fairness. I mean, a game show has laws and regulations that oversee it. You can go to jail if you don't do a game show correctly, or if you fix it, for instance, in the 50s and the scandals that happened. So it's really important. We have to be so diligent, not only in the questions and how they're given to people, but also when she does talk to people. So we always make sure the votes are done before we have those chats. But we also still try not to tip the hand too much to put a target on somebody's back. But the contestants are really good. They'll bring it up on their own, and then we can go there. But there is an art to it. And I think, again, just always, it's a fun game. Everyone's there, but we are playing for money. We do want to keep that sense of fairness and balance. So you have to be a little bit careful. We don't always point out every mistake, because it doesn't always seem fair. Somebody got a very hard question, somebody got an easy one, just because the way the thing's laid out. We don't always want to point that out too much.
And in speaking about the contestants as well, and just the casting is so fascinating for shows like this because, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about kind of the vetting and the process they go through, but it's not just a case of finding people who know trivia and are really strong at it and might be really great contestants. It's also about the dynamic that they're going to bring on camera. And when you watch each episode has such a unique feel and charisma to it based on the makeup of the team. So it's also thinking about who you're putting together. So I was really fascinated in what goes into finding individuals that not only are great contestants, but that really are going to bring themselves and lend something to screen.
Casting is everything. I think we can do the writing, we can do the questions, we have a great host. When you put those 8 people, that cross-section of America on there, and really everything that they're about, that's to me when the show comes to life. And there is, and thank you for saying that, because there really is a story that develops over the episode. And maybe it's not a coincidence that we have a crime scene cleaner on the same episode with a ghost tour guide on the same episode with a cheerleader who's obsessed with crime shows. So you can see how these people are gonna interact and really share something about themselves, and it's all gonna be kind of a connective tissue, and you don't really know where it's gonna go or who you're gonna lose as the show goes on. So it's really important, I think, personally, and I think certainly for the studio and the production company and the network, the inclusivity has been the thing I'm most proud about this show. Our winners don't look like any other game show winners. There's a very certain look to who typically could be the smartest person in the room who wins a show. And traditionally, it's been somebody who looks like me. And that is disturbing to me. I think it's really important that our show really, because of our casting, we don't have 1 or 2 people who don't look like me. It is literally the color of the rainbow. every single time, and in terms of every way that they can possibly identify. And I think what that gives us is a guarantee that somebody's going to get to the end who is not going to necessarily look like most game show winners. And that to me, and that has to also go in the question writing, right? It has to be the same. The questions have to be things that people can get who don't necessarily come from the same background and have the same questions that you would grow up with on most game shows.
And within the dynamic of the team as well, it's interesting because there's these interpersonal relationships that build throughout the episode. And, you know, sometimes there'll be someone who's getting cut and they're like, make sure you all get Michael. I don't like him, as they're walking off. Yeah. And then there's times where they're really supportive and really engaged with each other. Are there moments kind of backstage where they're able to interact or they get to know each other? Or is it really you want them to meet on the stage for the first time?
In the original show, they were always part of the format was they would spend some time with each other, and that would hopefully have them bond. I think Survivor was just starting at that time, and the idea was, you know, coming off of that was Survivor meets a game show, so they wanted to have those allegiances to sort of grow. And then we got rid of it in the new version, but in season 3, the current season, we let people spend 10 minutes again together, and I think it's funny in a weird way. And again, maybe this is where the world has gone to be a nicer place, believe it or not. I think some of the people felt worse about voting for people because they sort of got to know them a little bit. And it's like, you know, I really like Mara, but I'm voting for Mara. You know, there was a little bit more guilt involved, which is so funny within just 10 minutes that people could feel a closeness. But I think other people did use it as an opportunity to size up the competition. But I like the element of it. It's not on camera. But it created a looseness, I think, between the cast and a bond that made it trickier. And I think that's good.
One of the things with the show as well is there's such a specific pacing and energy, and there's kind of this rhythm and momentum that's constantly building, and so you always feel like everything's moving forward, and that comes from a lot of different aspects in terms of how you're building that, you know, and especially in terms of live editing between the cameras when you're on set, post-production on it. And so how do you work to make sure that it always kind of has this momentum, because it's not even the same pacing at the end of the show as it is at the beginning and at the middle?
I like to think of it, it starts out as a comedy because Jane's really having more fun with the contestants, and as it gets more serious within it really turns into a drama. We had more than one person break down and cry toward the end of the show this season, and I'm not surprised by that because I think it gets much more intense, it gets much more personal, and as they get closer to the money, they're much more about who's going to win, and we have much less to talk to them about. It becomes more about, why do you want to win this so badly? Where in the beginning it's like, oh, so you work at Starbucks, and I came into your place once. What happened when I came in? Was I nice? You know, that's sort of the tone at the top, but by the end, it's really much more, a little bit more vicious, I guess, you know, and in a good way, and it becomes a real drama. And I think the show tells its own story. I mean, the eliminations, I always say, like, the best thing about working in unscripted TV, anything I've ever worked on in unscripted, we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I would ever be on a scripted show because I don't want to know and be able to skip to the end and know how things are going to end. I need to see it unravel before me. So when we're in the control room and somebody gets voted off that we're surprised, there's a gasp in the control room. Like, we're all so invested in what is going on that I think that drama, like every commercial break, someone's going to go away. How do you turn a show off? You need to find out what's going to happen.
And the production design, even that plays an element in it, you know, and there's a really specific aesthetic to the studio, to the graphics that you're using, in how you're kind of creating that environment, which also is adding itself to the sound design. And so with production and sound design, how do you really want to use that to, again, create that energy, create that momentum, because that's also infiltrating for the contestants in the studio.
I think it's so funny. And, you know, even when you're just testing contestants, so casting producers are working with them on, on a Skype or a Zoom, it's pretty amazing to see how nervous people get, even just being asked questions just with no one even watching, except for, it's just being recorded. Add the music, add standing there, add, the intensity of the lights and the flashes. It's a pretty incredible environment, and people literally forget their name sometimes. It's a very intimidating environment, and I think that is definitely a part of the look and the feel of it, for sure. The sound, the music, the light coming on you. It's intimidating by design.
And they're obviously not aware of the camera movement, the cuts that are being made, the angles that you're using to kind of create that for the audience. So taking away all of the things that you're using to build that for the audience, for the contestants in studio, what feels important to you in terms of what you're building for the audience at home, and especially when it comes to a lot of the camera work on the show?
I don't know if you're a fan of the housewife shows, but Some of us within the business like to call that reaction TV. Somebody says something, then it's reaction, 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 and then they say something else at the dinner party. And that's why dinner party scene becomes so exciting. I think we're a little bit of a reaction show as well. I think it's really fun to see. Again, when somebody messes up on a more traditional show, which I love Jeopardy, but if somebody messes up on Jeopardy, the person next to them isn't going, oh my God, like this. Where our contestants do, because they're working as a team. So I think the fact that we get to intercut those reactions, they're sort of become our built-in audience, because they're now losing money, or you're wondering, are they going to go after them? Or are they going to want to get rid of them, or somebody who gets something right and they react? So I love feeling that team, and I love the sort of the reaction feel of it.
And you bring up that it is a team there, but then there is a point where it becomes about the individual, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about it starts as a comedy and ends as a drama. Do you find that shift in that moment where it becomes the individual versus the team tends to land at the same beat within the show, or does it really vary episode to episode?
When it's down to 3, it's a dogfight. It's really intense. And people really, the nicest people can sometimes become, we did some theme episodes, and we had a holiday episode, and I can't specifically say it is, but people who you normally would see dressed in a mall, like a Santa or an elf, and all of a sudden, they started losing their character toward the end, and they started becoming the person who wears the suit more than the person in character trying to be jolly, if you know what I mean. So it's really funny to see, even people who are professionally used to putting on a happy face, when they get close to something like $80,000, are all of a sudden wow, the claws came out. And that wasn't a hint. The claws, get it now. Sorry.
When you film the segments where they're kind of walking off and they're given that opportunity, they have the opportunity to turn around and talk back to people as they're leaving, and then you're filming the little segment after that pops up in the corner of the screen where we see their kind of immediate afterthought, which again, I love you bringing up reality TV. It feels very much like, if someone gets caught on The Bachelor and they're sitting in the car telling you the aftermath of that for them. Are you just really kind of with them for a few moments, being like, we're just going to get this quick soundbite, or are you asking them for a few different reactions to things?
We get several different options. The most important one is what they feel when they first come off the stage. I'm really against putting words in people's mouths. They sort of know the show now, so they know to make a little reference or be funny about it or think of a clever way. But the person who does those OTFs, the after show, on the fly, I guess it stands for. But those after show interviews is somebody who comes straight from reality TV. As if they haven't worked on an elimination show, I don't want a comedy writer standing there with them. I need somebody who literally does that, because sometimes a pause or sometimes somebody being, we don't know where they're going to go. So we have to first see what are they going to say and let them be real in the moment. Again, how many shows do you get to see on a game show the person reacting who just didn't win or just got let go? So it's a really important element for us, and I love that people get to say their last thing before they go off.
And being 2 seasons in and going into a 3rd season, what have you found along the way from this iteration of the show to really be the strengths of it that you want to find space to lean into, or places where you've still kind of continued to just very minutely evolve the format or aspects of the creative choices you're making?
We did something different this season, which was theme shows. We did 6 of them. We did them in the former NBC version of the show 20 years ago. I loved the theme shows. Identical twins competing against each other is just so interesting. Again, not something that other game shows can actually get away with. I think is easily a few, but not many. We did a drag queen episode where they just went for each other. We did a WWE Superstar show, which was absolutely amazing. I think that evolution to the show was just so exciting, because the storyline writes itself, the jokes write themselves, and you really get to see a different display of humanity. I think even that holiday show where you've got all these people and they're dressed like elves and Christmas carolers and Santa Clauses, and yet they a different side comes out when somebody's under pressure. And I found it fascinating, and I think it just gave a boost to everything. We're all the shows are solid. Those just stuck out to me as being really special.
I love that. It's such a great format. It's such a great show, and it's really something that's so engaging and interactive to be watching at home. So it's been really interesting to hear all of this information. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for asking, and just being here is great. So thank you.
Thanks.
Watch the show.